Well, everybody, it's so awesome to be here right now on our panel of Indigenous Protocol, the Blind Spots of AI. And I was just wondering if anyone minded that I just start in our traditional. I'm Sarah and I am Māori from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I just like to start our way and Māori way, and then we'll just kick it off. So, tēnā rā tātou katoa, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou, he mihi tuatahi ki te atua, ki Rungarawa, he honore ki a koe. Ki a koe, that, I don't know how to say this properly, the Goethe-Institut. Tēnā koutou mō te kaupapa tino nui I tēnei rā, me ngā tōhunga o ata ahi tereria, Angie, Rick, Tyson, and Megan, tēnā koutou katoa. Me the listeners, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Just a tiny little mihi. Ko waio, who am I? He Māori no Aotearoa, ko Ngāti Kahurawa, ko Ngāti Hine, ngā puhi oku iwi. Motutou te maunga, tau mārere te awa, motutou ahau. My name's Sarah, and it's a tiny little welcome to everybody binding us together, us here who are present today, those of us who have been but are with us, those that are coming but are with us, and the spiritual realm. I include my land and my water where I reside, and I acknowledge all of us here that are here today. And thank you so much to the Goethe-Institut for this panel and this opportunity to talk. So that's me. Now it's the interesting part, and it's to talk to our panelists, the authors of Out of the Black Box, Land-Based Indigenous Protocols in AI. And they are, I'm sorry, I have to read it just because I like to get the proper names. So it's Professor Angie Abdillah, is a Palawa Trawolwe woman, founder and CEO of Old Ways New, and works with Indigenous knowledges and systems in the design of places, experiences, and deep technologies, and is a member with me of the Global Futures Council on Artificial Intelligence for Humanity, as part of the World Economic Forum, co-founded the Indigenous Protocols and Artificial Intelligence Working Group, IPAI, and is a professor of practice for the UNSW Faculty of Art, Architecture and Design. Welcome to you, Angie. Megan Kelleher belongs to the Barada and Gabbalbara peoples of Central Queensland. She is a PhD candidate with the Digital Ethnography Research Centre and the Centre of Excellence for Automated Design, Making and Society, and is one of RMIT's Vice Chancellor's Indigenous Pre-Doctoral Fellows in the School of Media and Communication, and is investigating whether the affordances of blockchain are culturally appropriate for Indigenous governance. Rick Shaw is and I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, is a Gamilaroi mathematician. And that's it. That's all I got for you, Rick. I'm sorry. And Tyson Yunkaporta is a boy. You don't look much like a boy. Is a boy who belongs to the Appalach clan from far north Queensland, author, Indigenous researcher, and the founder of the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Lab, Naikeri Deakin University.
Yeah, I'm a Black Benjamin Button. And thank you for the brave attempt at pronunciation of all our place names. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts to all the Maori of Atareawawa. And
see, you're fun to watch.
yeah.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure in reading all of your CVs. There's so much more to you all than that, and I know that, and that's what I can't wait to get to the heart to. But boy, talk about feel a little insecure reading your CVs. They're very impressive. But I just want to get cracking right into it. firstly, in talking with Jeanette, who has given us this opportunity, you know, I was saying how it's often pitched, Indigenous knowledge, digital technology, you know, worlds apart. You know, what could digital technology teach the ancient cultures? This is some narrative that I've heard, and what I've discovered anyway, for my own personal point of view, is actually how aligned for anyway, Maori, I hate speaking Indigenous like I know every other Indigenous, but how aligned digital technology is to Maori thinking in this way of connection. We see it as a physical manifestation of what we already knew, and that was we're connected, people, place, time, but throughout time, not just present time. And in that way, I feel very excited about what we bring to this conversation of artificial intelligence. So I'm going to just start with a first question somebody asked me. If you could, each of you, reintroduce yourself your way, and in a way that you would feel you would like to, and perhaps just as a beginning, just say what brings you into this realm, bringing your indigenous knowledge, indigenous knowledge, can't speak English, to this topic of AI or digital technology. So Angie, do you want to start?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess going back a number of years ago, having these deep yarns with my uncle about pattern thinking was really when I started to get my head around this deeply complex way of understanding the interrelationship and interconnection of all things. And for me, those yarns that we were having a number of years ago before we started the company was really what got me, I guess, moving beyond the typically Western way of kind of intellectualizing how technology is and can be and should be, to understanding what I think there was an understanding of that, what that intuition really was telling me the whole time, that we have sophisticated knowledge systems that are so incredibly complex and rigorous and foundational and interrelated and connected with us as community. We have this interrelationship with these knowledge systems, whether they be kinship or country, and it was through, I guess, that realization of just how much I didn't know, but how complex these various different systems are, and how incredible those old people were at being able to observe and work with, and I guess it's, you know, that it's a different relational connection, and there's a humility involved in that. That's what really, for me, when I started to drop into that knowing, or that realization of just how much I didn't know, I realized there is so much for us to learn here, and so much for us to learn from our old people about how we can design technologies that have that same respectful and equilibrium and balance with all things. And there's I guess a gentleness. There's a different way that we understand how all those systems exist and how we relate to them. So I guess it was that moment where I realized that there is so much that we can learn and so much that we can do yet to design technologies with this, that have the same sophistication and the capacity for life and for meaningful life to exist within that particular paradigm through ubiquitous technologies. Sorry, that was a very long.
No, it was not long. That was that's what I said, is just introduce yourself the way you want and the topic the way you see and how you've come here. Tyson, what about you?
Yeah, that wasn't too long, Angie. You had me at ubiquitous, so I got like 2 words. It was awesome. It was very short. Hey, so yeah, I'm here for a laugh mostly, and the sort of sexy juxtaposition between like ancient people doing new stuff. No, not really. It's more like so you see my background here. It's a still from the first ever movie to depict an Aboriginal person in the future. As far as I know, it's the first one I saw anyway. Pitch Black with Vin Diesel, who's awesome by the way. And yeah, unfortunately, the blackfellow you can see just beside my head on the side where that's not picking up my hand when I try and show it. The other one, he gets eaten by. He's the first one to get eaten by aliens, of course. And you know, I'm just concerned. I don't want us to be the first ones who are eaten. So you know, so that's sort of going into the future. So I'm a bit of a Luddite, and if you look into the history of the Luddites, they weren't against the technology. They were against the industrialization of labor. And so for me, it's, you know, the I'm just feeling a bit worried and a bit cautious about industrialization, the industrial era 2.0, you know, the digital sort of thing, and not its effects just on labor. I mean, that's obvious. Most people will be redundant, but it's going to be the effects on land. So that's what attracted me to working with Angie, was looking at, she works with country-centered design, and so it puts country, land right at the center of things. And so, you know, basically we're looking at protocols for, you know, how to make sure that land is considered first and is at the forefront of everything. And it can be a source of innovation too, like your mob there. So like in New Zealand, it was like, you know, hey, don't you know we have earthquakes here, bro? You want to get those servers and put them in the creek, float them there. Then they won't fall down. You know, it can be as simple as that. So anyway, yeah, that's what I'm here for. Something and giggles. Megan Kelleher.
Megan Kelleher.
She, her.
Hey everybody. So why am I here and what brought me here? Well, so my degree in media and communications, during the course of that degree, I, you know, really started to kind of consider, I never really had a, you know, a North Star, I guess, in terms of what am I really doing this for and where am I going, until I started to sort of really think about the relationship between power or Indigenous disempowerment, media, and you know, media ownership, representation, all of those kinds of you know, sort of intertwined you know, ideas and issues. And once I kind of, you know, really sort of set my sights on you know, making my work about, you know, bringing my work back to you know, empowering or re-empowering you know, Aboriginal people, it really made my work meaningful. And so I've kind of followed that you know, North Star, I guess, always, you know, obviously coming from a place of being grounded in my you know, Indigenous identity, but tying that to my work was something that you know, I kind of had to do purposefully and think about purposefully. And so, you know, my degree, you know, took me into you know, working in government, and I was sort of working in strategic communications, and starting to kind of, you know, see again the ways that media is used to, you know, I guess, you know, set agendas and all that kind of thing. And starting to really get an understanding of the processes of government, and then also kind of really starting to sort of recognize within myself that working in government wasn't really the path that I wanted to take. I wanted to come back to academia because, you know, I really resonated with the freedom of being able to kind of think and, you know, think through these issues and speak to them, I guess, you know, through the literature. And so I, you know, made my way back into academia, and looking at this, you know, new emerging world of blockchain and Indigenous governance, and sort of looking at the impacts of what blockchain technology or automation would have on, you know, Indigenous governance. And so thinking about how, you know, if processes are automated, but they're absent of data that is related to, you know, the lived experience of Aboriginal peoples, then what does that mean for those processes? And so this has kind of, you know, brought me in contact with Angie and with the IPAI, you know, workshops that happened in Hawaii, and then earlier this year, and I think it was just this year, wasn't it? I kind of feel as though it was last year, but yeah, so just this year, you know, in those, you know, sort of second and third iterations of the IPAI work, you know, thinking about AI, and so really about what happens if our ideas and our perspectives and our knowledge and our, you know, values are not, you know, kind of, if we don't have a place at the table at the outset of, you know, the innovation of these kinds of systems, then what does that mean for not just for us, but for really for all of humanity? Because our knowledge is really valuable, and it needs to be included. So that's where I'm coming from.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. Thanks, Megan. And Rick.
Western states govern on the behalf of capital. And the philosophy that says we have dominion over the world is going to kill this planet. And the only thing that's going to save this planet is to turn to old ways. We, Indigenous peoples, come from cultures that put the land first. AI is just the newest way that capitalism is working out how to screw us over. So our cultures, our Indigenous cultures, which are screwed over by colonialism, our cultures are reviving, and AI needs old ways to make sure it's used for people first and not profit.
Rick is a pure mathematician who works at Deloitte. He works on a lot of predictive modeling stuff and algorithms and such. As a pure mathematician, yeah, he doesn't know how to introduce himself. So I'm just throwing it in there. He suffers from late stage mathematics. So
that. Well, just as you've been each sharing, I've just taken notes. I'm still a pen and paper kind of a girl. You know, when you talked, Angie, about connection of all things, I was thinking of the internet of things, you know, same thing. It's, you know, I feel like the Western world's just catching on. I heard from you, Tyson, I think I did, whatever you said reminded me of one of our elders who in 1990 was talking about something completely different, but said Western science and technology might have the know how, but we have the know why. And without the know why, you're rudderless. You just produce things for no reason. You, Megan, talked about colonization. Was that you? Or was that Rick? And it was also about the data gathering. You know, it has to be relevant to Indigenous people. And I sure found that out in my master's that I did on a Māori lens on digital technology. When I first discovered algorithmic bias, I thought, hang on a minute, this feels very familiar. And the more I read, the more I went, oh, this is actually just the analog. What I'm reading is the digital version of the analog colonization that we already know. And AI is all about the data. Really, it's all about the data, how it's gathered. And it's not just about it, but in terms of what I've been looking at. And so when you said we need people at the table, when I was at law school 20 years ago, finding out how the law was used, like to me, the law is like an analog algorithm because it's embedded with the values of just only a very small demographic of society. It historically always has been. And also it reflects the values that are so different to, I say ours, I'm going to be inclusive and include you, but to ours, and that's what I realized was this Western notion of the individual right to own and amass, as opposed to our value was if you have the right to belong because you do, therefore that immediately sets up the responsibility that we are each of us responsible then for the collective guardianship for the distribution, not the accumulation, but the distribution of resources for the collective well-being now and for the future in recognition of the past. So I keep thinking if those two things could somehow be reconciled, and then I think, well, if, just as you've shared, while we can embed, if we can embed from creation through to deployment AI, with our, so it's oddity to be bought and sold AI, but another resource for the good of, how far could we go? Angie, in the paper, it says this: Indigenous protocols for artificial intelligence represent a clear commitment to systemic change in a time of flux and transition, a phase shift towards a way of life that is not transhumanist or utopian, but ingeniously re-embedded in the law of the land to ensure the future survival of our living biosphere. So would one of you like to, because there'll be tons of people listening that may not really understand what that means. Does somebody want to share what that means?
I guess, it really comes back to what you've said just earlier, Sarah, that I think that really resonated with me. You mentioned this a number of weeks ago when we were yarning online, and we were talking about, as you just did now, about the differences between distribution and accumulation. And it really, when you were able to so succinctly summarize the fundamental differences between those different paradigms, the Western and colonial and capitalist paradigm and an Indigenous paradigm, really, that's it. You've just nailed it so succinctly. One is of distribution and the very considered and the very considered responsibility of managing natural resources and the distribution of those natural resources, as opposed to the Western individualist, capitalist expectation of accumulation. And when you think about the evolution of technology, Western technology, of course, you can see, you know, the foundations of those technologies, and in particular AI. If we think about, you know, how it's not that hard to stretch the imagination 10, 20, 30 years into the future to see how the evolution of AI is, where it's heading, based on those different models, and what the opportunities are, if we think about from a systems level, what the potential is for technology, ubiquitous technology, to be designed with that fundamental difference, one of the very considered care for natural resources and the distribution of them, and how technologies at a systems level could be designed to reflect those systems and how they work, and perform and operate with the same values and principles and protocols embedded within the actual architecture itself. So I think really we've all got, you know, quite uniquely different perspectives and voices, and I mean, there's a lot of alignment through with us four, but from my perspective, it so much comes back to what Megan said earlier as well, about who sits at the table, the cultural capacity of those people who are sitting at the table. When I'm talking about that, I'm referring to our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters who we need to work with, but also the methodologies, you know, the process, like how are we embedding those protocols in the methodological processes of software engineering principles and practices, so that our cultural values are really embedded within the actual systems design itself. That's when I think we can start to see different types of AIs coming into reality and actually producing very different outcomes.
So it looks as though we might have lost Sarah. No, there she is.
Sorry about that. I had to then just quickly go onto my data. Anyway, so I'm so sorry. So you finished, Angie? Did you just finish then? Okay.
Yeah, I just basically said what you said was really top notch.
I did hear most of it, and I got the last bit when you said about Megan. It's all about who's sitting at the table and culturally upskilling. You know, there's a big talk about becoming digitally transformed as a company, but you know, what about the cultural upskilling that needs to occur in countries like yours and ours, where the Indigenous people have been the colonized, but you know, yeah. Anyway, so
can I just say it's not just about representation. It's not just about, like, you know, do we have, you know, are we centering these voices in tech and all that sort of stuff? That's good. But what I think one of the most exciting things about working this way, if you're working with ways rather than just, you know, who are we pushing forward and why, and what looks good on the poster, and kind of, you know, what's a sexy tweet and all that kind of thing. If you're really working with integrity from the protocols, things start to get really interesting. Like, they get really interesting because our protocols in our culture are really limiting. Like, they're really, you know, all our obligations and the protocols are usually about limiting the things that you can do. As you know, from your culture as well, you know, the protocols aren't just there to, you know, it's not just free, you can do what you want. Protocols are actually like little firewalls and stuff that prevent you from overstepping. And this makes things hard. You're working in the tech space where everything's got to be quick. We need to, like, incrementally increase efficiency this much, and then that'll take off and all that sort of thing. And it's tricky for us. So basically, we're trying to join the race, but carrying a 20-pound lead ball with us as well at the same time. But it's really interesting because once we get in there, once you're limited, it sort of forces you to see things that other people aren't going to see. So I've been working on theoretically, I've been working on a chatbot, but it's not a chatbot. The idea is, I know there's a joke of, like, as an Aboriginal person, you always feel like Black Siri, like everybody, whatever anybody, like, oh, that's an Aboriginal person, I'm going to ask them all the questions, like they'll know everything about Aboriginal culture. So we thought, oh, how would you make Black Siri? And so we're trying to make this chatbot. And so we start looking at all the decision trees and we're like, Jesus, these settler decision trees, they don't make much sense to us. So we're trying to tweak, and then, no, that doesn't work. Well, where are the roots? Where are the roots of these trees? And it's like, hey, where are the roots? Oh, there are no roots. There are no roots for this tree. They just come out of nowhere. And so we can't really make the decision trees work. And so then, is there any other option? And so then people start talking about, well, if you've got a learning algorithm, you could probably build one like that, but it depends on what kind of data it's going to graze on. And then that comes back to your first point that you made right at the start about, like, what kind of data do we look at as Aboriginal people? What are the massive, complex data sets that we can, have our learning algorithms grazing on? And which data sets are the ones that are going to produce the kinds of thinking and outcomes that we really need in the world, going forward for like several generations. So it's this kind of thinking, it kind of produces all these amazing out-of-the-box solutions and, new directions. So I was working on Black Siri, and now that sent me in another direction from thinking about that, So either I'm just going to be hopping around, Zeno's paradoxing all over the place, or, I'm going to discover like the next big thing, and then we'll have a startup in our garage, and then I'll own you. I'll buy.
Because I'm not a technical person, what you just said was so interesting, that you are confined to technology that's already been built. And so just in that example of decision making, it doesn't fit, it's not fit for purpose, our purpose, it's not fit for our thinking. I would not have known that. So
but it's unquestioned. It's unquestioned in all the rest of the world of tech.
Yes.
But we're forced to rethink the decision trees. And what might we find there? Or what might we find when we're trying to avoid these decision trees that just don't work? It's very cool.
So does that mean it is possible to create new decision-making technology based on that? Right.
That's
exciting.
That's it. Black Skynet. Finished.
It feels
we did
like
it.
It was more agile.
And well, it could potentially it is. Yeah.
Organic and yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, when we think about those, what I think we're always trying to do is, and I say we as in, us mob here, I think we're always looking to the past, like what examples do we know worked in the past. When we're thinking about automation, there's actually plenty of them. When we're thinking about, when we actually start exploring what are ancient technologies and what are those different design principles embedded within those ancient technologies that are still relevant today. And, there's a lot of, pre-industrial technologies embrace energy and flow and work with those energies and flows, whether it be wind, water, sun, what have you, the elements in such a beautiful, poetic way. And I think what we found with the really brutal foisting of industrialization and those various different technologies was a of course, a complete rupture to many different societies, but we also lost a hell of a lot of various different types of technologies that were evolving from a fundamentally different foundation, and that was working with energy, with country, and with energy. And so, you know, there's the lesson. You know, what have we gained? Yes, of course, the Industrial Revolution has been incredibly important, but for who and for what purpose? Of course, you know, when you trace it back and you look at where we're at right now, like, I wonder what it could have been if we embraced energy flow like we can now. And, like, you know, with Tyson's example of the decision-making tree, there's a perfect example and a really beautiful analogy of a conceptually different way of understanding how technology can evolve. If we're thinking about the centering of country, but also the working with those incredibly sophisticated systems of knowledges and energy flows that exist all around us.
I loved what you talk about when you talk about country-centered design, as opposed to this whole user-centric, and how, yes, it places humanity at the center of everything, not our beautiful environment and our planet that we couldn't live without. I find that, so every time each of you are speaking, I think, gosh, there are so many ways that Indigenous knowledge really has an opportunity to, well, I just feel like, as you said, we're in a state of flux. If COVID hasn't told us that, emerging digital technology was already doing that. If that wasn't doing it, our environmental collapse, well, I don't want to say collapse, our environmental challenges have been doing this. And I feel like there's never been a better time for new answers at this decision-making table, wherever that is. And it's, you know, so when you wrote your paper, all of you speak about it. What were you hoping to get out of it? What did you want people who read it to go away understanding?
I would say that what we're hoping to, or what we were hoping, and I can, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that certainly from my perspective, it's about reimagining AI or reimagining any of these kind of automated systems from you know, the perspective of custodians or custodianship. You know, sort of if you're bringing in this idea of sort of, you know, stewardship. You mentioned earlier about, you know, about law. And if you think about, you know, coming from a perspective where instead of, you know, having an idea of ownership or ownership versus belonging. So as a custodian, you don't see yourself as an owner of, you know, things or land or you know, whatever. You're really just, you belong, and you sit within this concept of flux, like Angie has said. You know, when we're not here permanently, we're really just, you know, we're here for a very short period of time, and we sort of receive, I guess, you know, all that we've inherited from our ancestors. And not just our ancestors, but, you know, the land and all of, you know, all things within, you know, the ecologies that we're a part of. And we, you know, as a custodial species, have a responsibility to, you know, to sort of pass on, you know, the, I guess, the world and all that we are part of, to those who follow. And so it's really about kind of thinking about AI from that perspective. And so, you know, rather than kind of coming from, if you are coming from a excuse me, perspective of where all things belong to everybody, like you said earlier, distribution, as opposed to accumulation. So, the we instead of, the I kind of thing. You're going to be thinking about, creating these systems from a really different sort of perspective. And so that's really, I guess, well, certainly what I was hoping to kind of infuse into these conversations, it's really about asking the question about, to what extent does AI and, other emerging sort of automated technologies continue or perpetuate the colonial project? And so that's really, just really a provocation, I suppose. And then coming from our perspective or collective perspectives, trying to kind of, I guess, kick off those conversations by providing, different sort of, use cases that we've, that we've imagined and explored in the work that we've done in these workshops and labs.
What about Rick? You haven't said much, Rick.
It's because I love listening to my partners.
And hearing your name in New Zealand, which is Rec. You're a wreck, Rick.
But I think it's for me it's standing up from what Megan said. I think if you look at Indigenous cultures all around the world, we are now reviving, and we believe the world is as it should be, in the sense that we accept what's happened, and we want now, and we feel that it is now that the Western capitalist system needs to start listening to us, because we know how to live in harmony with the world. So AI, there are theoretical issues with the way the West is approaching AI, because the Enlightenment Project says that rational approaches will get you to where you want in this world. What we know as Aboriginal people is that the sort of the Enlightenment approaches will not get you to a full understanding of and a full enablement, will not enable you to live in harmony with the world. The problem I have, the AI is, I think, a really big problem because of the Western belief in rationalism, and it will be used as a process by which to further embed the role of capital over the role of people in the world. And I'm saying this because I'm a little bit enthused by, I'm taking a particular approach here because I'm a bit enthused by what's happened in Glasgow with COP, whatever it was. And there's so many words, and no one's doing anything. And about what we all need to do is start looking after the planet. And to me, it's really obvious that what you need to do is start looking at the people who have been living in harmony with the world, rather than those people who over the last 200, 300 years have been like kind of just doing a lot of damage to the world, to work out how to live in harmony with the world. And I think that the AI, the opportunity for AI to do good if it is embedded in Indigenous protocols is amazing. The fear that it will be used for profit, not people, is, as Megan said, it's just a continuation of the colonial project.
Look, 2 days ago I was making stone knives on Dja country with traditional owners from there, and half the day, like, you know, before you're really even getting into it, half the day is taken up with the protocols of coming into relation with each other, coming into relation with the place, coming into relation with the stone, finding that stone that sings to you, tapping them all, making it all just right. It's got to be, you know, you got to make sure things are sorted out with the spirit of that stone, and having that history. You know, one of the things we talked about was how for most of human history, and it kind of sucks because for most of human history until like 5 minutes ago, we were the world leaders in technology here in Australia, because we were the first, tens of thousands of years before everyone else, we were the first to have ground edge stone tools. You know, so everybody else is still like, you know, we're like, you know, so we go and have a look, other countries see their thing, and it's like, oh, what are you doing there, bruz? You're still napping with, you know, deer antler there on some flint, are you? You know, it's like, oh, yes, this is how we do it. And then you might show them that ground edge stone, and they'll be like, you know, where did that come from? Did it fall from the sky? Did it come from the gods? Like, you can imagine this interaction where people are just like, oh, that's amazing technology, you know, forever. So, you know, we're sitting around the fire having a laugh, you know, grinding up. It's like, how did you make that? Yeah, you just rub it on another stone, bruz. And that was for most of human history. We're the world leaders in technology. Angie always talks about like spinifex resin as the world's first polymer, you know, all these sorts of things. So we led technology for most of human history, and the last 5 minutes, suddenly everyone's got Zoom meetings, you know. But the thing is, we had that system of technology whereby we had those protocols in place to ensure that we weren't damaging things, or we're managing the landscape to make sure that things are shifting along as the climate shifts, and that we're taking care of many generations of descendants into the future. And that's what those protocols are for. So it's a kind of slower tech, but it lasts longer and builds more sustainably and is more advanced into the long run, you know. So those protocols are handy, you know, if you want to just sort of get out of the rat race of tech that's just sort of incrementally improving on the original thing, which was kind of clunky. You know, like having your CPU over there and your, I don't know, your memory, whatever over there, and not thinking about how to bring those together over some deep time to make more efficient machines or anything like that. And, you know, sending African kids down into the ground to dig up your rare earth metals while other African kids are shooting at them, you know, because that's what you've had to do to install a puppet government and completely destabilize the country, and so that you can keep getting those metals out of there and then shipping them over here, and then you know, processing those metals and producing radioactive waste from that processing activity, and then dumping it there in that country and destroying that, and then bringing it back and having a little Zoom meeting with tens of participants we've got in here. You know, it's we'd probably take it a bit slower, you know, in our Stone Age culture. You know, just from that little story of, you know, a couple of days ago, what I was doing on Dja country, you know, we still got all the knives made, you know, but at the end of the day, we have knives that, you know, we'll hand down to our grandchildren. They'll keep going, you know, whereas your really fast flint napping ones, they only last like 2 weeks, and then you got to make another one. It's like, slow down, flint nappers. Grind your stone, grind it good, get good stone, make it last. Your grandkids will be using that knife. So just take a minute. It takes longer. It can take like, you know, to make a really good stone axe, for example, it can take like, you know, 2 hours a day for a year to get it just right. But then that will last for, you know, 100 years, that one axe, you know. Whereas the napped one, you know, that'll only last a few goes, and then you need a new one. Which is kind of like these mobile phones we have to use. They don't last long, eh? So get your protocols on.
I really like what you said about the 5 minutes, you know, like 5 minutes ago, you know, we've got Zoom now, but, you know, because I know that your culture, your people, is this correct? have had 40,000 years of uninterrupted civilization and relationship?
Incorrect. That's like the maximum amount of years for the out of Africa theory to still work. So we cap it. We cap it at 40 to 60,000 years. There's things like the Genuine monolith, you know, with ochre designs on it that are 100,000 years old. And we know it's older than that. So, you know, it's just that the out of Africa theory can't work with the older finds. So we cap it at 40 to 60. Yeah.
Right.
So otherwise, then the humans didn't come from Africa then. And
we actually
perfect themselves in Europe. So, yeah.
I like the idea, though, that Rick was saying of why wouldn't you go to the people that have managed to sustain life and culture? Why wouldn't you go to them and ask, hey, how have you done it?
Well, I think it really sort of begs the question then about, you know, what are the problems that AI is solving? Like what are the, you know, what is it a solution for? And, you know, if we sort of keep that in mind, then, you know, we might kind of perhaps consider that, you know, the problems of mankind sort of have, you know, if you look over deep time, they sort of haven't really, you know, they're fairly sort of, have they really changed so much? And I think it's really just, you know, since we've had the introduction of, you know, capitalism and industrialization and, you know, these kind of innovations and these ideologies that have introduced new problems and, you know, sort of scaling trust, for example, you know, because of globalization and, you know, rather than sort of keeping to what traditionally would have been, you know, very local, you know, land-based and place-based, you know, ways of living, I think these new technologies are really sort of embedded, or the problems that these new technologies are attempting to solve are really embedded or coming from or tied up with, I think is probably the, you know, is a better way of putting it, tied up with new problems that have emerged because of, you know, scaling and, you know, trying to kind of, you know, we have issues of trust and we have issues of, you know, there's this, I don't know, I mean, I just kind of feel as though the problems that AI is solving, are they new problems? Or I don't know, I think I might just throw to someone else there because I don't really know how to kind of follow up on that.
I think there's an incredibly important role for AI to solve as real issues that are definitely, like, so many of them are, you know, direct result from the colonial project and capitalism. I absolutely agree. But I mean, I think there's also the capacity for us to think about how these technologies are not just solving problems. And when we think of it, like, if we move beyond this concept of the intelligent machine, which primarily is based on, you know, input output, you have to feed the entity input to produce the output. But the conceptualization of these machines, these so-called, you know, intelligent machines, right now in their current form, are still quite infantile, I think. If we think about, you know, the sophistication of our systems, our indigenous knowledge systems. So, you know, in the paper we talked about, you know, how one particular kinship system works, and the origins of those kinship systems, generally speaking, on this continent are designed to keep bloodlines clean and healthy, so that you have small groups of people, which we all know it's better to be, you know, living in smaller groups of people for all sorts of reasons. So those kinship systems are designed to keep small groups of people healthy. So when we think about the other various different knowledge systems, whether they be land-based or kin-based, they're incredibly, you know, they've evolved over millennia, and these systems are rigorous, and they're interrelated and interconnected, and they all work as one. You know, there's not, in the kinship system itself, it's not just about humans and who you can marry and who you can't. There's all sorts of other different interrelational connections, plant and animal, and it's all, of course, tied to country and the seasonality and the different ebbs and flows that happen through time, and the different ways in which the natural resources are providing for. So in those systems themselves, there's so many lessons that we can learn from, and not just around, you know, how can the current AIs right now be, you know, be better based on our knowledge systems to solve everybody else's issues, you know, that we didn't create. But what I think is possible is for us to actually look at the systems design themselves of these knowledge systems, these incredibly sophisticated knowledge systems, for us to then conceptualize what is the future of our AI, Indigenous AI, if we base AIs on these systems, to start reckoning with to restore balance, basically. You know, when we go back to that amazing, beautiful elder who we spoke to at the beginning of the incubator, Annie Irene Watson, who talked about, you know, the differences between law, Western law and Indigenous law, and how, you know, you could spend your lifetime decolonizing or indigenizing yourself, technology, where you live, what have you, or you could actually just be in your own culture and in your own law. And I think that what we have right now is the capacity to actually start designing AI from that basis, with law as the foundational basis, so that we can start to design better, equitable ways for distribution to happen, for the management of natural resources and the distribution to happen. So trade, climate change, education and learning, welfare, the security of natural resources, everything can come back to the systems design that we have already here in our knowledge systems.
Miss.
Oh, can I just give a question?
The Nestle question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you, Nestle.
Did you read? Do you want me to read it out loud, or did you all get it? We have a question from Rita that says, hello, I have questions. When you talk about AI, do you mean general AI or just machine learning applications? And how would big companies like Nestle accept input from Indigenous protocol without tagging it as bad?
Well, it depends. Yeah, well, it depends how productive we are. You know, like if you're Nestle and you're looking to, I don't know, like get a whole heap of Indigenous women in a third world country into cycles of dependency on your formula, like, you know, we can help, you know, because we're inside, we're on the ground, like we know how people think. We can automate your whole system for you know, making sure your milk runs dry before you leave the hospital, and that you're stuck in this cycle of dependence, and then that you have to use dirty water to keep mixing up the formula, and then your child gets in a cycle then of malnutrition and disease, and that then gets them back going for more and more because they're voiding so much of the nutrition that they need even more formula. So we've got you covered on your business model there, Nestle, and I don't know if you can tell if I'm being sarcastic, but basically I don't care if Nestle thinks we're bad. We probably don't want Nestle's business. Is that right, Angie? How does that sound? How about you have some Indigenous AIs that are finding ways to make sure there's abundance and regenerative capacity in a community and in a landscape that will make sure that you have increasing profits forever instead of a brief spike over a few decades before you have to move on to the next country and then eventually run out of countries and then everybody hates you. So we do need bad AI. Andras Kaselafwe.
Whoever is judging what is good and what is bad, because I think
reading in the comments.
Everything that you have all spoken about is basically that even though we're talking about AI, we're talking about human issues, the human and the planet issues. And when I did my master's, my great big revelationary finding was this, that here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the big finding is that there's still a huge gap between Māori and non-Māori in New Zealand, and that there's a fearful on the one hand, non-Indigenous people knowing how to approach us, mistrust on the other. So we talk about technology, but technology will only amplify, to me, what's going on in the analog, and it's a human affair and a relation, because for us as Māori, and I'm sure it's similar, we start off with we're connected. I'm connected to people, place, and throughout time, and it's because of that, then it's how do I maintain relationship. So one of our elders says the number one ethic, if you want to use a word like ethics, the number one ethic is how do I maintain and make flourish those relationships, people and planet. And then from there become these, because you've actually taught me the word protocol in the way you mean. I wouldn't have known that, but I like the use of that. So now I'm just stealing your word, but we then have protocols. All our protocols are dependent on that one ethic, and that is that our relationships to people and planet today going forward is all the protocols line up just for that one thing, that one ethic. So there is so much of humanity that needs to be, if we're going to get good AI or good, or a responsible AI or digital technology for good, or all those words, it's us that need to be good, whatever good is, and we'll all have a difference of opinion about what good is. I've written
I would just like to respond to Rita's question, and I can see that Rita has also you've put in a follow-up comment. But just to go to your first question, Rita, about are we talking about general AI or machine learning applications? I think that that these values and protocols and ideas that we're talking about could really apply to both. When you're thinking about, general AI, I don't know if you sort of mean, artificial general intelligence, which is, kind of like, all-knowing, powerful, connected sort of Skynet-like systems, machine learning or you know, their systems essentially sort of having intellect and intelligence, a self-awareness, or, you know, beyond human understanding, which, you know, from what I understand, you know, that is unlikely to sort of to really occur. And so we're talking about, you know, probably machine learning applications, really. And so it's about bringing insights and values and perspectives to those applications that are really, I guess, aware of, you know, like you've said, Sarah, what are the values that need to be considered? You know, there are really useful, you know, applications out there, and that are solving important problems, you know, and far more efficiently than you know, humans would potentially be able to, you know, to do them. And so that's not to say that. So it's not to say that AI is bad. It's really about bringing these values, I suppose, to the development of AI in general. So specifically and generally, that would kind of be my answer to your question. And, you know, as far as a big company like, you know, whether it be Nestle or whether it be, I don't know, you know, whatever the corporation is, if I suppose you'd have to sort of think about, you know, what the motivations are of that corporate entity. You know, if they're sort of driven by the, you know, the idea of increasing market share to sort of, you know, bring value for the stakeholders, then they're probably going to be operating on an extractivist sort of paradigm. And that is not, I would say that's not necessarily in line with, you know, an Indigenous, you know, worldview. And so if you were, you know, it really has to, you kind of have to get to the core of, you know, maybe you'd need to sort of influence the corporation overall, rather than just kind of targeting the specific machine learning application, or, you know, whatever AI application that you know, one sort of unit within that corporate entity, you know, might be sort of working on at the time. You know, we're talking really about values kind of being, you know, driven into and across, and, you know, trying to get to the core of what's driving, you know, what's driving your work in general, really.
Can I just say there's a quick question here from, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name. I think it's Joshin, sorry. It says, Indigenous voices have been systematically excluded from any conversations. Last but not least, those around new technologies. Is the AI case different to other technologies when it comes to Indigenous input? Can I just quickly answer from my point of view at that point? Yes, I think that, like, from my perspective anyway, is it's the creation of the why and the problem that doesn't just need Indigenous input. For me, I personally feel we need all eyes now, all hands on the wheel, all eyes on at every stage of decision making, from creation to deployment, because our digital technology is affecting everyone globally at all times. So there's not one person that has the answer, but all of us need to be there, from the creation of, I think I've got a new product, or I see a need, or I think there's a problem, because many people need to look at that to even decide if that they're good ideas, let alone then determine what technology they might use, to how they gather data, who's determining the questions, who are the subjects, who are the researchers, how are they going to do that research? It's the whole process that needs to have so many of us there to co-create, to collaborate with one another as citizens of the world, you know. And I do believe that Indigenous people have got much of what is needed. You know, when I hear about inclusion of diversity, I don't like that phrase, but inclusion of diversity, all of this, we as Indigenous people, as Māori, we have words that talk about that's who we are, as inclusive, not exclusive, and all of this sort of thing. I think, you know, anyway, so that's my thing. Rick and Tyson, do you want to talk about those things that you've put in the chat?
Rick, now.
You go, brother.
No, I've done most of it here, out of us two. You got to say something. She right? I'll carry you if you like, brother. I can do that. Yeah, look.
Because Rick said you.
So Rick says, yeah. Slavish devotion to rationalism. Gödel and Turing's work show the limitations of axiomatic systems. Anyway, this just he'll speak more to that as we go, but we have 15 minutes. Jeez. Yeah. Well, look, just really quickly, that just reminded me of we did a lot of thought experiments. So we did all the classic AI thought experiments. So we did the paperclip maximizer. People, you can look it up, you know, these things. AI thought experiments are really cool. Another one was from Alan Turing. So the Turing test, it's like, you know, what questions would you ask a robot to find out if you were talking to a robot or a human being, kind of thing. And so we did like a black Turing test and had a good laugh thinking about what our questions would be to find out if something was human. And then there's something else where you've got you know, in another room, somebody translating a language, like an AI translating a language, and you know, if you can figure out if they actually understand what that language is, you know, how you would do that. That's called the Chinese room, but we did the Gamilaroi room, which is Rick's language, and we also did. We made up our own thought experiment for the Internet of Things and AI. We called Brother Fridge, and so we were thinking about, so if somebody had like a smart fridge, and you know. So it's a man in a family, and he has a relationship with the fridge because the fridge knows him better than his most intimate partner and doesn't judge him, and like, you know, is looking after all of his needs. But he's in an extended family, you know, so he ends up developing this almost sibling relationship with this smart fridge. But then what does his niece call the fridge? Does his niece call the fridge uncle? And then, you know, we got into heaps of stuff then about the avoidance relationships we have in our kinship system. Like, you're not allowed to talk to your mother-in-law or pass something to her. So what if your mother-in-law goes to the fridge and gets one of your yogurts out? What if the smart fridge gives her something from you? Who's in trouble then? Who's broken the law? Like, do you get speared or does the fridge get speared? You know, all these kinds of things. We ended up, yeah, we had heaps of fun with it. But out of that came so many things. We ended up doing test cases for all kinds of different things, you know, that came out of that. So we ended up applying a marriage algorithm from our kinship system. We applied that as a selector protocol in genetic computing. You know, where you breed those algorithms, you like splice them together. If you look up genetic computing, it's pretty sexy. So we actually ran that as a selector against a whole heap of traditional problems in genetic computing. Like rastrogen, that's one of them. And so, you know, basically all these different problems where you got your, you know, these algorithms that you're breeding, but we were breeding them according to our marriage law from our kinship systems, which is really cool, you know. So we had some really interesting findings come out of that. You know, we ended up, we were thinking about all kinds of things, especially in the avoidance protocols, like the ones that limit you, you know, with your in-laws. That ended up leading us to some interesting, you know, automated decision-making things with blockchain. So instead of proof of work and proof of stake, we were thinking about proof of auntie, about how you could automate, you know, the seeking of permissions and the granting of permissions to access Indigenous data, to protect Indigenous data sovereignty, and also to protect Indigenous sacred sites. So when someone enters that site it pings on their phone and they have to ask permission from an elder remotely, and then the elder can say yes or no, and then the elder gets a bit of Bitcoin, you know, or something, so elders could be employed that way all the time. I don't know, we had heaps of really cool, you know, little test cases we were working on, including for, you know, predictive modeling software and things like that, you know, little things we were working on, and it was just really cool. So doing those thought experiments, but looking at them from an Indigenous perspective, it did produce a lot of really exciting, innovative ideas that somebody a little bit more technically capable might like and pick up and run with. Maybe Nestle. What do you think, Rick?
I think that we need we see the world as our job as Indigenous people is to live in harmony with the land, and we can't. My feeling is that I want everyone on this call and everyone, and my big push over the rest of my life is to try and encourage people to live in harmony with the land. And I think everybody on this land, everybody on this call is Indigenous to somewhere. And you may be living as an expat, and so you may be living on the land that you feel connected to. But if you're living as an expat and you don't feel connected to your land, go to the people who are connected to that land and ask them how they can look after that land and how you can look after that land. And if you're living on land that you are connected to, start looking after the land that you're living on, because that's what we all need. That's what we need to start doing now. And my fear around AI, it is just the next tool to take us further away from the land.
Mm.
I mean, 10 minutes. So if all of you would like to just really say what, I'm glad you brought that up, Rick, to talk about like your calls to action and what you'd like people to leave thinking about. So sorry, Angie, you go.
No, that's cool. I mean, I guess just, yeah, sparking off that, and yeah, I guess my last comments would be around, you know, this conversation that we're hearing a lot of late around, you know, regulation. And I think from an Indigenous perspective, we understand regulation from a very different perspective. We you know, our societies have evolved from have a very different governance structures and systems in place. And when we talk about Indigenous protocols, what we're really talking about is an extension of governance. And that governance is what, as Tyson and everybody's actually mentioned on this call today, we've all been talking about how, and in our experience, you know, with these various different prototypes and various different testings, we've been finding that the governance, the protocols support innovation. So yes, I think there's a question around, you know, who's doing the regulating. That's an important conversation that we all need to have. Clearly, the, you know, private sector, I don't think have capacity to self-regulate. But I also don't know if nation states also have the capacity or the trust to regulate either in regards to AI. But I think we do. That we know, as Rick has said, you know, as stewards, as Indigenous peoples internationally, we are the one group of people globally that have been recognized as being the stewards of our lands, the careful management of our lands over here on this continent in Australia since time immemorial. You know, so we do have the answers, you know, and you're seeing all of these various different Indigenous leaders in particular at COP26 at the moment, you know, saying just move over and allow us the space to actually lead. Indigenous leadership is here. We do have capacity, and in regards to technology and in regards to regulation and the governance, good governance that's required for both the public and private sector, then yes, there is the capacity for us to think about regulation in a very different way. And that way is through Indigenous protocols, Indigenous governance and protocols. And it's not just an existential kind of exercise. It's about a methodological process. How do we embed the principles and practices into programming logic itself?
Beautiful. Thank you, Angie. Megan, do you want to say something?
I think, yeah, you know, it does come back to, you know, I can see that there are a couple of questions or, you know, comments in the chat, you know, talking about, you know, are we talking about particular AI applications? You know, are we talking about, you know, AI in companies? And when we're talking about, you know, Rita has there, you know, a question about AI in companies being used to maximize profit. And so really this is, again, it's about a paradigm shift that's required. And so, you know, so really I think, you know, we've got to just, if we're coming from, if we're designing systems that are, you know, supporting and enhancing our roles as custodians and as a custodial species, if we're designing AI systems, and that might be machine learning or AGI or whatever kind of, you know, instantiation of AI that could be, you know, referred to, if we're, you know, bringing I suppose a philosophy that is about, you know, it's not just about inclusion. It's not just about representation. It's not just about, you know, a host of buzzwords that are always kind of tied up with, you know, any kind of conversation about, you know, Indigenous values or Indigenous empowerment or, you know, that are sort of, you know, that are really grounded in this sort of deficit model of, you know, what has been lost, you know, by Indigenous people and what have they been dispossessed from. We're all going to be in the same boat, you know, and the conversations around, you know, COP20, I don't even know what number it is, you know, that there is an urgency, and AIs potentially could support our journey, you know, toward a, you know, a better future, or a future that is not, you know, heading towards environmental collapse. But it's really about the approach. It's really, you know, it's really about bringing values that are not just about, you know, extraction. That really is just, I suppose, the fundamental thing that we're arguing here. You know, it's not about saying no, all AI is bad. It's about saying, what if AI was created from, you know, from this perspective, or, you know, if these values were embedded in the design of these systems. And so it's really just kind of about understanding and listening to Indigenous peoples, finding out what's important, what are your values, and I think then, you know, we could see some really different technologies emerging.
Thank you for that, Megan. And sorry, Tyson, we have a couple more minutes. I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the couple of minutes, whether we just get cut off, but would you like to wrap it up?
Well, you know, Rick's always talking about what is intelligence. He says algorithms algorithms are just like a process that expresses an opinion, like in a void, and we tried to get around, I don't know. So, with our experiments in the evolutionary computing, it was like, we're making all these little algorithm babies, and they're jumping around and they're grazing in the data, and they're like, well, this is data, we're having fun. And we tried to I don't know, give them something that resembled some kind of landscape, because most people create these AIs and they're just floating in a void. But we were saying, well, nothing can have intelligence until it has a context, until it has a topography. You need land in order to be embodied and to know where you are. So we experimented with creating statistical landscapes, etc., with these, so that the different clan groups could be drawn from different things, and then you could have this thing in evolutionary computing called speciation, and so there'd be variety between the different groups that you were breeding, all that kind of thing. But in the end, if you've got no land, you've got no intelligence. And what is intelligence in our way? You look at all of the language words in Aboriginal languages for intelligence, and they're all connected to listening and to the ear. But our definition of listening itself is different, because you're not just hearing. It's not just auditory. You're taking in knowledge. You're embodying the other person's position through story, and through real haptic cognition and haptic connection, within the landscape where you're truly connected. And so, AGI, artificial general intelligence, that couldn't happen until a machine is not just receiving inputs of data from us, but actually hearing us. When that machine can hear us and can actually hear the messages also coming from the land, then there can't be artificial general intelligence. So we figure first we need to teach the people who are doing the coding how to hear before they can but what an amazing thing to bring. Just looking at what listening is and what cognition is from an Aboriginal perspective, and then thinking, how could I change my algorithms to do that? And we talked to Ben Goethe, who's the guy who invented the term AGI, artificial general intelligence, and so we had some good yarns with him, and he went away from that going, ooh, Indigenous contextual logic, Indigenous contextual reasoning. And he started to change his algorithms. This was after he did Sophia the robot, but he started to change his algorithms to get context in there for his artificial general intelligence. So, we're bringing more than just, the land is important, look after the land. That's huge, but everybody says that. We're kind of bringing, as Indigenous people, a lot more to the table than that. We're bringing thinking that's out of the box, that's out of the black box. And
one of the things we're bringing is a deep understanding of the limitations of rational systems, which, frankly, the West has got to, but Western practice is back in the 1850s, and they haven't taken on board their own philosophy around relativity and quantum mechanics. Our philosophies are much more consistent with the modern Western metaphysics than Western practices.
Now he starts. Now the time's up.
Yeah, the time is up, and I was worried how I would do an hour and a half, because I thought it was 45 minutes, and I shouldn't have. Thank you all so much for your insights, your time, but the time that you spend pouring that into articles and all your work. And I've learned a lot myself too. I do hope, thank you everybody else for participating, for your really interesting questions. Hope you go away with a lot in your head, because I have got a lot to think about now. I've just written Indigenous contextual intelligence. So thank you, and thank you to the Goethe-Institut also for having the foresight and the insight to see that an Indigenous panel is very enlightening. So thank you. Thanks, everybody.